every child is curious.
George, look what I found.
Turn their curiosity into a lifelong love of learning.
That's a periscope.
It's one of the most important gifts you can share. Create a curious reader.
Oh, you want to build a castle like that one? This is super bedtime reading.
Share a book together today. Visit read.gov.
Welcome to today's show. I'm Mike Miller. My special guest, Lesley Greenwood from Fairfield County Job and Family Services. Lesley is a foster care adoptive caseworker. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Glad you're here. I know that you're busy. We do appreciate you coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
And April is Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month.
Yes, it is. We're very busy right now, Child Protective Services.
There's a lot of activities going on with this month.
Lots of stuff going on. April being Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month means that maybe you've seen a lot of blue ribbons around town. The blue ribbon is kind of what signifies Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month. And you might notice when you're driving down Main Street, right there by JFS, all the little trees, they have blue lights in them, and they go all the way to the gazebo. So if you notice the blue lights, that's what it's for, in honor of Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month. And then we have our 10th annual Candlelight Walk this year. We're really excited. I can't believe it's been 10 years.
I've done a couple of those.
And that's going to be on April 28th. It's kind of our final big event in relation to Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month.
Now, can anybody come down to do the walk? They have to sign up, to show up?
No, it's a free event for everyone in the community. The more, the merrier, actually. And the really cool thing about the Candlelight Walk is that prior to that, also at JFS, is something called Circus Night, which is also a free event for community members. So Circus Night starts at JFS around 5 o'clock, and then the Candlelight Walk begins at 6:30, and we all kind of convene in the JFS parking lot. And we walk from JFS all the way down to the gazebo there at the corner of Main and, Brain Freeze. What is that?
The gazebo downtown?
Yeah, the gazebo downtown.
And normally you get quite a few people. I know the one year I went there were 100 at least, maybe more than that.
It's really cool. We have lots of folks in the community come out to support. Generally we have some kind of really sort of short, whether it be a song, someone sings a song. One year I think we had kids that did interpretive sign of the song, Carry Your Candle. So it's just an event to honor the kids that are currently in care through Child Protective Services because of abuse and neglect, and just to kind of make awareness in our community about Fairfield County's kids that are living in unfortunate circumstances.
And the walk itself, people actually hold candles, and they have safety, so I can use them.
And your kids, age appropriate, can hold a candle. It has a little plastic safety device around it so the wax doesn't melt down on your hands. And we carry the candles from JFS down to the gazebo, just honoring kids that really are the silent ones in our community.
What the reason for blue? Is there a particular reason for it?
I'm sure there is, and I feel bad saying I don't know.
No, that's okay. I wondered because I know we had yesterday at JFS we wore blue.
Everybody wore blue
in honor
of the blue ribbon.
Right.
So.
And I think people sometimes don't realize how big a problem child abuse is in Fairfield County.
Definitely something that not everybody wants to talk about. It's difficult to talk about. It's difficult to hear. But unfortunately, there are a lot of kids currently that our agency is working with, and a lot of families that are struggling. And unfortunately, their children have been abused or neglected because of their struggles. And then that is when our agency has to become involved. So there are lots of kids that are living not at home with their moms and dads, but living in foster placements or kinship placements because their homes aren't safe enough to be with their parents.
And I know part of the promotion of this month is there's a poster out about 3 football players from Lancaster holding babies. How did that start?
Well, that is the brainchild of many folks. I have to thank our director, Rich Bolin, and a huge shout out to the LHS journalism class, the LHS broadcasting class. and the Lancaster High School football team. Everybody was kind of throwing around a couple months ago, what should we do to kind of have a big campaign, some sort of media campaign in April. And unfortunately, we've seen a real rise in our cases of children that have been victims of shaken baby syndrome, or you might see it SBS/AHT, and that stands for shaken baby syndrome abusive head trauma. From the end of February just to the end of March, we actually had 4 cases here in Fairfield County of children that have sustained injuries from being shaken. So with that kind of increase in that particular type of child abuse case, the brainchild was maybe we could do some sort of media campaign to help involve kids that are kind of in that age range where we would see them being likely to potentially shake a baby, and how do we educate young kids about the dangers of shaking a baby. So reached out, and the journalism class and the broadcasting class were really excited to help us out, and we got 3 football players, and the babies are famous Child Protective Services babies now. They've made their debut, and they did a little photo shoot. And that's what you see. It's really cool. There's a billboard here in town. I think there's been something in the paper. It's just a really awesome image of the 3 football players holding the little babies saying, "We wear helmets, they don't, never shake a baby." So it's really cool. We're very proud of ourselves.
How long have you been a social worker? I mean, I know you're young.
8 years, 8 or 9 years I've been with JFS. My whole grown-up professional career, I've been at JFS. I graduated from Ohio University. And
The Ohio University.
The Ohio University, Harvard on the hockey. And
Yes.
go Bobcats. And I came right to JFS, and I started out as a success coach with community services. So that's why Circus Night is an important thing to me as well, for all of our families in the community that deserve a night out that's free and fun and safe. That's kind of community services working hard, and the rest of JFS to provide Circus Night. And then in tandem, we've been able to add our candlelight walk at the end of Circus Night. So it's a really awesome event that many, if not most people in the building at Job and Family Services participate in. It's the other really cool part about working at Job and Family Services. There are a lot of really wonderful people that donate their time because they believe in our community and they believe in keeping kids and families safe.
One of the issues in Fairfield County is the huge drug problem. And sometimes people think of it relating to adults when it actually relates to infants and some of the issues they deal with.
We're seeing a huge number of children being born and testing positive for opiates. And unfortunately, children that are in utero drug exposed have a lot, it's much more difficult to parent them as an infant, as a normal, healthy baby. So you may also have seen recently a lot of media and a lot of information coming from also Fairfield Medical Center about how to care for kids that have had in utero drug exposure. With the heroin explosion in our community, we have just seen a huge number of folks that are addicted, and unfortunately then their parenting is neglectful. We see a lot of cohabitation of families because of such terrible economy and an inability to have employment. We see lots of people living together, and when you have lots of folks living together that are using drugs, everybody doesn't know everybody very well. So we have people that are taking care of kids that they may not know those children very well or have an established relationship with them, and parents don't know the other individual's history. So we see kids unfortunately being neglected or severely abused because of the drug abuse going on in the home and the multiple caregivers.
Is it a safe statement to say that the majority of the calls coming to protective services are involved with infants with drug-related problems?
In the past 4 or 5 years, we've just seen a rapid growth in our community, and I'm trying to look here at my little page, but I know that I have a stat recently of how many kids that are involved with us that are dealing with serious drug and especially heroin abuse and prescription drug use. But I think the majority, I would say, of our calls to protective services are because of that drug and alcohol abuse.
What are some of the challenges that social workers face in protective services when dealing with drug-related issues for infants?
One of the hardest things when we're talking about reunifying children is that parents need to get services to get clean. So we don't have the services we need locally to help people get clean from serious heroin drug abuse. So there in and of itself is one of the wrinkles in helping kids reunify with their parents, because we don't have the type of recovery services that they need. Then secondly, while you're trying to recover, we have a baby that, because you have used drugs while you're pregnant for that baby, we have a baby that is often much more difficult to take care of than a normal baby, because of their irritability, because of their feeding troubles, because of their inability to sleep. Often babies have difficulty and are very sensitive to light and noise just because of that in utero drug exposure. So parenting this infant is more difficult. So here you are trying to overcome a disease of drug abuse, but you're then also parenting a child that has a lot more special needs because of your choice to use while you're expecting.
There's a program at Fairfield Medical Center, Charlie's.
Charlie Dressback, a nurse at Fairfield Medical Center, has been offering classes for community members and for professionals. And if you are interested in taking one of those classes, you can always call Fairfield Medical Center and ask to participate in one of Charlie Dressback's classes, where she gives very explicit information about in utero drug exposure and about how to take care of an infant with in utero drug exposure. Lots and lots of stats and just tons of information that's very beneficial for folks. Many of our foster parents have been taking the class, and just a lot of professionals in the community, to try to get as much information as possible to help parent kids and help them have, you know, a really successful life.
How many foster parents do you have?
I think we currently have 48 families licensed right now here in Fairfield County through Fairfield County Child Protective Services. A lot of folks think that there are more than that, actually, and there are many more licensed foster parents in Fairfield County, but that doesn't mean Fairfield County Child Protective Services is who holds their license. There's lots of private agencies. So we are always, always, always in need of foster caregivers. And obviously, as you're hearing today, you see that the need is high for parents that would be able to provide the kind of living environment that's conducive to some of these infants and children that have been in very neglectful environments and substance abuse environments.
I would say it would have to be much more difficult to help train foster parents dealing with this drug issue than just a normal foster.
It's kind of a whole new ballgame in the last few years with being a foster parent. You know, when someone chooses to use drugs and alcohol and make choices that are not legal, then we have a criminal piece, as well as the Child Protective Services piece. So it is difficult for foster parents because their involvement now with the court system is also very different, and reunifying children with parents is very different than it's been. It seems as though foster parents are just becoming more and more involved. Not that they weren't before, but they're at a different level now with court involvement and being a part of that team decision making. And to add into that, being a caregiver of a child that's experienced this kind of pervasive neglect is very difficult, because you don't just go from that kind of environment to a normal family environment. It takes some time to help a child understand how a family functions and appropriate behavior and not appropriate behavior.
My guest today on Lancaster Perspective is Lesley Greenwood from Fairfield County Job and Family Services. She is a social worker there dealing with Child Protective Services. Is there a process to wean these infants off of drug, like a 10-step process or 12-step process? Or is there once the infants have drugs in their system, how does that work? Or is that something you guys get involved with, or does that go to Fairfield Medical Center?
Well, babies that are born drug addicted, often some have to receive more medical treatment than others. But there is kind of a 10-step how to care for drug exposed infants kind of highlight tip sheet that we've been trying to get people to see and hear, and that providing a calm and quiet environment for the baby, choosing soft paint colors even in their bedrooms and minimal lighting, massaging the baby, comforting the baby to help ease that irritability, swaddling the baby in blankets, because many drug-exposed infants find it soothing to be really tightly wrapped. Rocking the baby as much as possible. In some hospitals you might hear it called kangaroo care, you know. When a baby is first born, they get that skin-to-skin time. So even though you might not be the biological parent of that baby, but allowing that baby to have that really intimate, quiet, calm time where they're tightly swaddled and being rocked, and just beginning to kind of have those moments where they feel safe and secure.
One of the areas people talk about shaken baby syndrome and abusive head trauma. Talk a little bit about the signs, just talk a little bit about those two.
Victims of shaken baby syndrome, abusive head trauma, are traditionally infants 3 to 8 months. That's because we see that period of crying peaking when children are quite small. As infants, we all know that how do babies tell us they're hungry, that they're wet, that they're tired, that they're overwhelmed? They cry. That's the only way that they can communicate with us. So we see that 3 to 8 month old range being where we see most victims of shaken baby syndrome, abusive head trauma. And they also have a very weak neck at that point. They're not able to sit and hold themselves up. And so the signs that you might see in a baby that has been a victim of shaken baby syndrome or abusive head trauma is irritability, vomiting, lethargic or abnormal drowsiness, breathing difficulties, are all signs that you might see in a baby that has, in an environment, shaken baby syndrome, abusive head trauma, where we might see that being likely.
And most of these are not accidents. These are not accidents.
Correct. You know, we try to really coach folks that it is normal to be overwhelmed when you are a parent of a new baby. Anybody without, you know, issues in their home. When a baby is crying and you can't soothe them, it can become very, very overwhelming. So what do you do when you feel overwhelmed? And we just try to tell folks, set the baby down, walk away, take 5 seconds, breathe, and come back. Don't allow yourself to become so angry that you would do something that you would truly regret, because it only takes a moment.
And there are permanent results
Yes.
of shaken baby syndrome.
Yes. Unfortunately, there are permanent results, and even with some of the most recent cases in our own community, we have children that are not able to see or are not able to chew and swallow on their own, or will most likely not be able to walk because of that shaken baby syndrome and abusive head trauma, the damage that has been done to their brains because of what has happened to them.
And if you suspect this, report it to you, who should they contact?
Call Child Protective Services, call local law enforcement, call whatever you feel most comfortable with, but you always can call Fairfield County Child Protective Services if you have any concerns about any type of abuse or neglect, not just shaken baby syndrome or abusive head trauma. You can always call us at 740-653-4060, and always ask to talk to a live body if you're calling to make a report of abuse or neglect. Don't ever leave it on a message. Always call and ask to talk to a person, and we'll get you to somebody as soon as we can so that they can take that report.
Now, are there classes that are offered for this? I don't want to say anger management, but are there classes available?
There are classes offered. We have just started with this whole campaign a couple times a month where we are offering shaken baby syndrome, abusive head trauma kind of informational classes to all sorts of folks. Some of our foster parents have gone, some of us as co-workers have gone, and then we're also offering it to some of our consumers that we feel kind of are in that age range or in that state that it might be likely that we see that this could be something that happened in their family. And they're just taught some of these signs, taught all of the very specific medical stuff so that they can understand different ways to parent if they're feeling overwhelmed, and what actually shaking your baby can do to your child, long-term effects.
There's one law, Clare's Law?
Clare's Law,
Clare's Law,
yes.
and that's talking about a little more education.
Medical professionals being required to educate, and child care centers must educate their staff also, because we have unfortunately seen children that have been victims of shaken baby syndrome or abusive head trauma in a child care setting. So that's what Clare's Law is all about.
One of the other classes was about dealing with newborns, drug. I know Fairfield Medical Center has a class. Talk a little bit about that.
That's the class that Charlie Dressback does at Fairfield
Okay.
Medical Center. And if you're interested in that, you can always call Fairfield Medical Center to sign up and reserve your spot. I know that there are several coming up in the summer months. I can't remember the dates exactly.
There's one June 1st
Yes.
from 6 to 9.
Yes.
That's a Wednesday. And then there's one on May 11th. It's a Wednesday from 6 to 9.
And you would just need to call in advance to reserve your spot, but really informative, tons and tons of information and stats on how to care for infants that have had in utero drug exposure, like we were talking about previously.
Do you remember your first time experience dealing with shaken baby syndrome?
Yeah, and that's one of those things that you don't really forget. Also, this in utero drug exposure stuff, I can recall that much. That one seems to be a lot more intense with regard to emotion for me, remembering the first time that I saw a baby come into the office and the caregiver was still administering medication to help that baby step down off of their withdrawal, to step down so that they would no longer continue to have withdrawal symptoms. It's one of those things that unfortunately we have to see a lot, and the first time seeing it is just overwhelming, and you can't thank caregivers enough for all that they're doing to provide a safe and loving environment. And you just wish that you could help folks that are struggling with addictions understand what their choices can do to their children.
When did you know that the drug problem was affecting children in Fairfield County? I know that you deal with this every day,
Right.
but at what point did you think to yourself, this is out of control?
Just in the last few years, it seems like every team decision-making meeting I'm a part of, or every time I'm calling to inquire about a placement to a foster parent, I am always talking about drug abuse and drug usage in the home. I'm talking about what kids have been exposed to or what we think they might have been exposed to. That multiple caregivers thing is always so hard when you're trying to prep a foster family about a potential placement, to say we have no idea how many people this kid's been with in the last week, who they've seen and who they haven't seen, who has provided care for them. Recently also I recall a case where we had a little boy come in and he had pinpricks on his fingers and on his feet from walking around in a house where there were needles just laying out. So to have to see that children are in that type of environment, it makes you really take a step back and realize how serious the problem is in our community.
And we talked about shaken baby syndrome, calling in, but if you suspect child abuse, call the same numbers? I mean, do you have to give your name? Is it anonymous?
You can always make an anonymous report of abuse or neglect. I will get on my soapbox and say that when you make an anonymous report, remember that it's just a normal gal like myself writing down the information that you're taking. And you might say 123 Mulberry Street, and I write down 125 Mulberry Street. There is an element of human error sometimes. Also, when we receive all that information from you, it doesn't mean that we've always gotten everything that we need. And if you give us your name and number, often we might call you back to say, hey, I didn't ask this question, or hey, is there any more about this particular thing? It is against the law for us to share who the referral source is. So if you called and said, Lesley Greenwood is making poor choices as a parent, when the caseworker goes out to the home, they can't say, hi, I'm a social worker, and Mike Miller just called and said you're a bad parent. That's not how it works. We're not permitted by law to reveal who the referral source is. Now, that being said, if your child's only been with one person and we receive a call, it's not hard often to determine who the referral source might be, but we are not permitted by law to reveal who the referral source is.
I know that there are, in coaching athletics, if I suspect something, I have to ask questions and then decide, take it to the parties to be, and from there, is there in any way that if you just suspect that and you say, gee, I'm not going to get involved in this, I mean, what should you do? I mean, is there counselors you can talk to for those people that...
I feel, I also do child abuse and neglect training classes for what you're kind of describing as a mandated reporter. Someone that's an educator, or someone that's a coach or school bus driver, or child care provider. All those folks are considered mandated reporters, which means if you suspect child abuse or neglect, you are mandated by law to report. So I like to tell folks that suspicion is really all that you need. Now that doesn't mean that I want you to blow up the phone with every tiny thing, you know. You do have to use some discretion about that. However, that's not your job, that's ours to investigate. So if you suspect or are concerned about child abuse and neglect, you can always call in. Now, what if your report doesn't rise to the level that you feel like we're going to be doing anything about it? Because that does often seem to be a big complaint. I've called and I've called and nobody does anything. What I want you to hear me say loud and clear is that every time you call, it's documented. It doesn't go undocumented. So maybe that fourth call or that fifth call is the one call that's going to give us enough information that we're going to be able to change the life of a child. So it's important that you call. It's a huge responsibility, I know, and I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but you really could be changing the course of a child's life.
Lesley Greenwood has been with us today. April is Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month. There's Candlelight Walk coming up again on Thursday, April 28th, starting at 6:30. Circus Night is before that at 5 o'clock. And then the walk from JFS building down to, it's the Fairfield County Governmental Center now, but JFS building, down to the gazebo. And again, you can come, don't have to sign up, just show up and show your support for this great cause that Lesley is part of. And we do appreciate you coming in today. I know I don't see you every day at work, but I know how passionate you are about working with children, and we do appreciate, the community appreciates everything that Child Protective Services does.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate our community. We couldn't do the things that we do without the care and the support of our community members, and I can't say that enough. I'm proud to work at Fairfield County Child Protective Services because I'm proud of Fairfield County, and I'm proud that we stand up against this type of violence.
And actually, you're going to be back in May with us to talk about foster parents.
Yeah.
So we'll see you then. And,
cool.
We do appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Remember, until we meet again, let's make a difference.
Uh-oh, Vince. They're really cracking down on safety belts these days.
What's up, officer?
I'm giving you a ticket for committing an 811.
Safety belt violation.
Compliments of Barney Fife.
We never wear safety belts. We're dummies.
Weisenheimers.
He gave us a ticket.
Man's got to do what he's got to do.